Order, please, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will move on to public comment. Is there anyone wishing to address the executive committee? And I didn't see anybody from the public on or anybody from the public attending the meeting. So we will move on to item number 3, approval of the executive committee meeting minutes of the May 12th, 2022 meeting, and the minutes were in your packet. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Langenhahn and seconded by Supervisor Robinson to approve the minutes of the May 12th meeting. Any discussion? Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minutes that when it came to the 5-4 vote to move the interviews for the vacant 24th district, I believe they had Supervisor Mask is voting against it, and actually I believe she voted for it, and they had Supervisor Seefeld voting for it, and I think he voted against it.
The clerk has noted that she has had that discussion already with Supervisor Mask and has already made those corrections, so they won't be reflective in the ones that you...
It is corrected in the packet.
It's corrected in the packet.
It is.
Okay, well, sorry about that. Thank you.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the executive committee meeting minutes of May 12th, 2022 signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. And the motion is carried, and thank you. Moving on to educational presentation and committee discussion, none. Operational functions required by statute, ordinance, or resolution, none. Policy issue and discussion and possible action, we have number 6A, supervisor attendance at WCA conference in September. And I'll just lay out a little bit the dilemma, and maybe it's not a dilemma, but historically, we have always had one committee member from each of the standing committees authorized to go, whether it be the chair, the vice chair, or the committee can determine a member from each of the standing committees. And then in years where it is the seating of the new board, the new supervisors are offered an opportunity to attend the annual conference because WCA waives the registration fee for first-term supervisors. Well, our budget is not going to allow for 6 standing committee chairpersons and or their designees and potentially 17 new supervisors to attend and have enough in budget for hotel costs. So now, obviously, not all 17 of the new supervisors are going to be willing or wanting to attend or even able to attend. So what I was thinking about doing, but I wanted to run it, throw it out to you as a direction, is offer it obviously and see what kind of interest we have from all of the supervisors, including and leaving the chairs making the discussion with the chair and vice chair and or the committee if the chair or the vice chair cannot attend as your designee from your standing committee, and then open it up to all of the new supervisors and see who has interest. If it does get to be more than the budget will stand, we'll have to take a look at it and see if there's a potential transfer that we'd want to look at from contingency, or do we want to limit the number of supervisors attending? So that's the dilemma we have. We've got roughly the room costs at the Wilderness is for 2 nights is $298. At the Clarion, it's $210 for 2 nights, and we have roughly $3,200 left after the known hotels for NACO conference and or the Ledge Conference for rooms that are already spoken for chair, vice chair, and/or NACO appointees. So we have room for, if we use the 220, probably 12, 14 people that could attend before we'd be out of money in the budget. So that's the dilemma I have. Thoughts from the executive committee?
Supervisor Mask?
Supervisor Mask, go ahead.
Thank you. I can't attend. I have to be home to take care of my dogs, so my space is open.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I was going to say is it's really important to have professional development of members, especially new members, people who may have never been involved in any kind of board in the past or any kind of, county government involvement. So I would be open to expanding the amount of money doing the transfer to get as many people to attend as possible after asking.
Okay, and I don't disagree. I just think that at the same token, another thought that I had was, having 5 committee members potentially attending the same breakout session that is being offered by WCA, I think it might be a little bit of an overkill. And so I would possibly look at a potential, instead of having, if they all from the same committee have an area of interest, making sure, because that was what we've historically done, is to ensure that we had coverage on the various breakout sessions so that we didn't have more than 3 supervisors attending the same breakout session. Because one of the things that we utilize that attendance for is to bring back ideas and provide it and share that with the standing committee. That's why would really encourage the chair and the leadership chair and the vice chair of the standing committees to attend so that they can bring back the education that's being offered by WCA. It would be a contingency transfer, and if it would needed, again, we got to see what kind of interest there is. Other discussion? Supervisor Seifelt.
Thank you, Mr.
September 28th, 18th, 19th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the dates on this?
September 18th is the Sunday, and then the 19th and 20th. And it is in Wisconsin Dells this year. Supervisor Robinson.
One of the options that you could do too is just to have people go for one night, because Sunday doesn't have a lot. It's a networking opportunity, and I know that a number of times I've gone down on Monday morning. That would save some dollars.
Okay, we got Supervisor Langenhahn and then Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we have to keep delving too far into this discussion just yet because the question hasn't even been asked. So if we haven't identified a problem yet, why are we trying to identify solutions? My preference is ask the question. If there is an overwhelming response, then bring it back to the executive committee and we can develop the response. But for now, the question still has to be asked. I appreciate you asking the executive committee for input, but I just don't think that we're having thoughtful discussion right now if there's no problem.
And you're right. I do need to get the information and the requests out there and get the feedback from each of the standing committees. That's why I'm asking you to put it on your agenda for discussion on each of your standing committees, because we do have to, right now, there is, at the home hotel, there is no rooms left. And so we're already going to the outside hotels, the Wilderness, which is a couple blocks away, and then the Clarion, which is also a couple blocks away from the home hotel. So we do need to identify the rooms that we need to try to reserve. And so that's why I bring it up. Again, I appreciate the thoughts. Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Longahan asked the same question I was going to ask, so I was going to make the same comment, so thank you.
All right, I will, so I guess I'm asking each of the standing committee chairs to have that discussion with the vice chair. If the chair and the vice chair are unable to attend the WCA annual conference, scheduled again for September 18th, 19th, and 20th. Again, as Supervisor Robinson points out, quite obviously, the 18th is more of a meeting of each of the board chairs of each of the 72 counties and going over the resolutions and approving of the, or voting on the resolutions and the bylaws for WCA. So there's not a lot of other education available. There is more networking. But find out if the chairs or vice chairs, and then also the people that are on your committee, the new supervisors, how many are interested in attending. All right, we will move on to number 6B, overview of the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan and discussion at each of the standing committees and the possible next steps. So each of you have had an opportunity to have a discussion with your committees as to whether or not we want to supplement, if you will, the 18 to 22 strategic plan and extend it for another 2 years because we don't really have the capacity to actually redevelop a new strategic plan for the next 5 years. And the pandemic has played havoc on some parts of ability to move forward, but also wanting to have that discussion at each of the committees as there strategies and or items that need to come off, be modified, added to. So I would throw it out to the committee to provide their feedback that you had at each of the committees so that we can capture those and then also look at a possible action moving forward, and that being amending the plan and then having the board at some point vote on it. Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the strategic plan, I met with 4 of the committees end of May and the first week in June, reference to the strategic plan. And the reason was, is what you stated, this strategic plan is due to expire the end of this year. And there were 3 questions that we also asked each of the committees to consider. But overwhelmingly, the opinions I received from the committees that I met with was they didn't feel that we should scrap this strategic plan, that it should be updated. And there were a lot of questions, especially from the new supervisors, as to where the strategic plan is as far as some of the objectives and the outcome measures. It was stated by several of them that the last 2 years, basically, the strategic plan was not able to move forward because our resources and the way to deal with the pandemic kind of put that on hold. So I don't know if, I know everybody here knows what, the committee chairs know what the 3 questions were asked. I guess my only question is does this have to go to the whole board to extend the strategic plan, or is this, how do you do that?
My preference would be that, this committee who is in charge of the comp plan and strategic plan ultimately would offer at some point an amendment to the current strategic plan and an extension of the strategic plan. If there's new items that we want to add on, such as some of the things that were discussed at HR Finance yesterday, one being childcare and or the other being potential housing. If those 2 are moved and added to, there also was a question about, is there information to update the plan on as far as data? And then is there some of the strategies that needed to come on and/or off or updated. And so my preference would be that we come up with what that new potential new strategic plan looks like as modified, and extend it for 2 more years to the 2024. Take that to the board and get the board's approval on it. That would be my preference. Supervisor Robinson?
I would agree with that approach. I think, though, that if we're going to look at updates, we should try to have that done by September, because the document drives a number of things, including the budget. And I know that, you know, Chris had run the public's, or the infrastructure committee meeting. We talked about new objectives. And, you know, I think there are a number of things, but I think many committee members were waiting for that updates and data from the department heads. So if we could take the summer, if you will, to review and see if there are new strategies or new objectives, I think that would make sense.
Vice Chair McKeon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with that, and that was the concerns from the 4 committees that I met with about, you know, where are we and some of these statistics and outcome measures. Some were up in 2019, some were 2021. I know the administrator said that would take some time with his staff to try to update a lot of those outcome measures, objectives to move forward. And I agree that that needs to be done. And as far as adding new objectives, there are 64 of them, and we have 12 of them, and the 2 that were mentioned by the chair about affordable housing and childcare, those issues have become very apparent over the last year and a half now that people are returning to work after the pandemic. So I agree that those 2 should be on there, but my question is 14 too many? Do we take 2 of them off, or leave those other, you know, leave the ones are and just add the other 2? I think you just add them. It's because I think that those are issues that are coming up more and more each day, as far as the housing and affordable childcare.
Well, I think at this point, there's been some requests of staff to provide some additional updated information. I think we need to provide a little bit of time for staff to provide that additional information. I think there's also been information about the 2 goals that are been discussed on various committees, child care being the one and housing another. So I think there's consensus, at least at this point, that those 2 be elevated to be included on the strategic plan, or at least possibly incorporated in part of the strategic plan as some of the goals already. So I think we've got some I guess I was looking if there was anything else that any of the committees had as far as items that they thought rose to the level to add to the strat plan. Supervisor Robinson?
We didn't have a detailed discussion, but the other 2 items that were thrown out were just our workforce and workforce development in light of the difficulty in recruiting. I think that will need some data, and the other one was energy efficient buildings as we approach some of those new facilities. So, but very, very high level, not really a lot of discussion or consensus, but throwing those out for discussion.
Supervisor Langenhan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to comment that when Supervisor McEwen met with the ERC, be late May for our June meeting, we had a discussion as far as the approach of how we were going to revise and update this plan. Similar to what Supervisor Robinson just said, we had very high-level discussions with the understanding that we would return in July and have more in-depth discussions to see whether or not we can add on additional priorities. So I would hesitate to add any feedback from ERC to the discussion today, because those discussions haven't taken place yet.
Very good. Very good. Vice Chair McKeon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that. I was going to ask if the committees feel I should come back in July or wait till we get some of the updates in August. And like that brings up an issue, like Supervisor Robinson said, that if we're going to be adding new objectives, that could affect the budget. So I don't know, I don't want to move too fast, but my intent was to go back to the committees in July, unless we want to wait till we know where the updates are. I'm just asking if that would warrant for that discussion with myself, or do we wait until staff comes back with some of the statistics or the things that have been updated. I know ERC does the template, and I reviewed that, and a lot of that, there are a lot of updates on there. So, thank you.
Supervisor Longenhorn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to add, well, speaking to ERC's objectives, there's, and I'm sure Vice Chair McEwen knows this, but there's still a lot of data that we have to collect to determine what the outcomes have been with the past couple of years of effort. So in regards to the question that was posed, I don't see an issue with the Vice Chair returning. We're going to have a much more in-depth discussion at our July meeting and dedicate some agenda space to it. If the Vice Chair was able to add perspective from a high-level perspective of the county, that, of course, would be very beneficial. Just my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet, absolutely. Supervisor Dickinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would mention is what we had talked about with this strategic plan is modification. So if we start adding 2 and then another 2, and then, hey, let's add another 1 or 2, that's actually a new plan. So I think we have to focus on getting the data, looking at what we've done, and then seeing what we can add in there that's a high priority, and then just move on.
I would agree. I mean, as one of the new supervisors pointed out, there's 64 objectives in the comp plan, and putting them all as priority number 1 means that we have none. So, yeah. So I think we have direction. We will have, each of the committees will have additional discussions at their next meeting and I think staff has got somewhat their marching orders as far as providing additional updated information and have those discussions. So we will also be bringing that back at a future point. But like Supervisor Robinson indicated, is we don't want to wait until after November, because then the budget, if we do add some projects or items to the strat plan, and it does require allocation of resources, we don't want to wait till after the budget is done if we're going to actually have meaning to that strategic plan. Other than that, I did want to inform as a note to each of the standing committees that one of the agenda items on the Thursday informational meeting is a overview, reports by committee chair and or designee. And so I'm going to request that each of the standing committee chairs provide a 2 to 3 minute report on the actions that the committee has taken at its previous meeting and the work that it's planning on doing to inform the board, because in some cases, even though the board, each of your committee agendas are out there for review, the agendas may not be reviewed by all the supervisors, yet they may want to ask specific questions on items that the committee has taken up. So I'm asking for each of the standing committee chairs to give just a brief 2 to 3 minute report at the education meeting on the actions that the committee has taken at the previous, that month's meeting. Committee members are asked to bring ideas about future agenda items, and our next committee executive committee meeting is July 14th, 2022 at 3 o'clock. Anything else for the good of the order? Short meeting today. Thank you very much. We're looking for number 8. Motion by Supervisor Seefeld and second by Supervisor Dickinson to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.